Good morning. Welcome to SJU. I've missed you guys. How are you? What's going on in the world, man? Nothing much, I presume. Not a lot going on in the world. I'm Roth Cornet. If you don't know me, this is Eric Goldman, and we are going to talk about season 2 of The Boys, which completed its finale last Friday. There was some controversy this season. Eric, not about the show itself, but actually just about the programming, that they didn't batch drop it. And it's weekly. I think I've seen you talking about that on Twitter a little bit. I am with you. My perspective is that it was actually nice to return to a weekly show and have that structure and that routine and that time to consider each episode in between. It's a little bit of a different feeling than binging. So curious, what's your take on that? And then let's dive right into, did we like it? Did we not?
First of all, I should apologize because you might hear power tools. There's a renovation of my kitchen happening right now, and there's some drilling and some hammering happening. Yeah, I'm all about the weekly release, and it's interesting. I've debated it online with people, and I understand like why you just want to watch it all at once. But I do think that even people, I think it's better for you if you don't think it's better for you as far as like getting into the show, talking about the show, being excited. If they had released this all at once, first of all, we wouldn't be talking, like it would have been 5 weeks ago. That was it. It was done. Moving on. But also it's like, think about, they released the first 3. Think about how they left off on that 3rd episode, which was full spoilers, which was Stormfront, killing everyone, like showing her true nature. And then that became this huge thing we can all talk about for a week and be like, oh my God, what does that mean? What's going to happen next? And I missed that. And I'm glad to get it back with a show like this or The Mandalorian or these shows that are doing weekly. And I just think it makes it for a better experience overall. You remember a lot more overall of watching it. It doesn't become all a blur. So I'm all for it. And I think you see The Boys' popularity this season, including on our wikis, is only reflecting, I think, a growing audience. So I think as much as some people were mad on Twitter, it did not hurt the show at all. And Seth Rogen put out a funny video. I don't know if you saw Roth, where he had Homelander watching like the people's tweets, the angry tweets. They like,
funny.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I'll go check that out. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that I was curious, actually, as I looked at how some of the streaming services were programming this year, including, I know this is a very unlike show, but the Great British Baking Show, Netflix is releasing weekly, which I thought was so interesting. At least that's what it appears to be in the last couple I've tried to catch up on. And so I thought that was so interesting, and I wondered if it was COVID related, that they are recognizing that they need to keep subscriptions going and attractions going for a longer period of time when batch releases aren't going to work for them as much, because I think they are a little bit worried about how much content that they will have in the next year or two. With production slowdown, though many productions are back. But moving off that, since this is not a discussion about the business of streaming services, but rather the business of The Boys, I really loved this season. I thought it picked up on the threads of the previous season perfectly, and added a new layer. It's obviously a commentary not only about our culture, about culture at large and superhero culture and entertainment, but also about the nature of superheroes. And I didn't really think initially that could be done, because that's been done and done and done. Marvel is sending itself up at this point. Mm-hmm. So, but I think what The Boys does is actually tap into the essence, I think, of what Kick-Ass was trying to talk about, which was, what would this be in real life? But except that they really are very overpowered. And it's finding that balance comedically so that it's not so dark and gritty and heavy that it's impossible to watch because our world is unbearable. Yeah. It's sardonic in its execution, but also emotionally effective. Very hard tone to balance. Very, very difficult. I thought it did it so well this season. And Eric, I've been meaning to tell you something for a really long time. I'm glad we're able to get this done today, but, I needed you to understand something. Yeah. Girls get it done. Yeah.
Whoa, big if true. Big if true. That was great. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I really liked the first season, but I think this season was excellent. That whole thing, the girls get it done, and how much that was like a runner through the season almost, about like sending that up and sending out them with the movie they were making within the show. All great stuff. And like you said, it's tricky because the sort of self-parody meta superhero thing has been done a lot. Marvel always has a winking tone to it, and DC makes Watchmen, don't forget. So it's like, like we've had the major companies already do it inwardly, but this manages to still feel fresh, and both has a parody of like superheroes and the popularity of superhero stuff, but also the culture at large, like the girls get it done thing, which, yes, you can say, you can specifically call out superhero movie moments, but it's also a thing that just happens within pop culture in general. So yeah, I really like this season. I really like where they went with it, and thought it did, it's a dark show as far as content, what happens, but like you said, it's not like, oh, this is depressing to watch, because it keeps that sardonic sense of humor the whole time, which I think is why it's becoming a bigger and bigger mainstream hit. If it were just, sort of sad, depressing, I don't think it could reach as many people, but I like that it has humor as kind of a big in for it.
Yeah, and sort of to your point, we have seen the popularity rise, and we have seen that on our wikis. You're absolutely right. Like, this is a very, very popular and searched show, and I think that's why. Because I personally, and we've talked about this a lot over the last 8 months, is in this time, people are going to be looking more and more to escapism. We don't really want to watch the apocalyptic shows right now as much, but this captures escapism. But again, also it doesn't feel saccharine, clearly. Yeah. It's the furthest thing from that. But at the same time, it's not without sweetness. Even if you think about Billy's advice, Billy's, like, I'm not going to say the word, but don't be a see you next Tuesday.
Sure.
Yeah, it's crass, but it's actually good, simple advice. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of people, frankly, could use that advice right now. Right. So it's just basically be good to each other, be excellent to each other without quite the sweetness of Bill and Ted. I want to talk about some of the new characters that entered the fray this season, and sort of, most notably Stormfront, and your take on that storyline.
That was excellent. First of all, I have not seen, much to my chagrin, I've not seen You're the Worst. So this was really my introduction to Aya Cash, but I thought she did an excellent job with this. It was because the way she's brought in is so interesting, because on first it seems like, okay, it's a parody of sort of that Instagram obsessed, self-promoting character. But then there's this huge shift about what she really is, what her background is. But then it becomes, and again, I will say this, The Boys is not subtle.
No.
But that's okay, because they're basically, because they both basically lay it on the line, like this, I wonder if we could make this topical at all, as far as like projecting some really ugly and not new ideas, but in a shiny package and in a much more like of the now, ready for media savvy way. And I thought they did a really good job with that character, as far as what she represents, and how, because she has this like flippant, I don't give a crap about anything, that's kind of enticing at first. Like, then you start to like her a little bit, but then you really see what she represents, completely ugly and awful. But I thought they did a really good job of that. And then I just thought Aya did a really good job playing it, as far as a really awful person who can also be a entertaining character, because it is a TV show, and you want to be, having a good time watching the show, even if you're like, look, by the end, I was like, get her. And I certainly was cheering when they all teamed up to stop her. But I think that's the sign of a good villain, when you can get me that invested.
Oh, yeah. I mean, certainly. Listen, to your point, it's not subtle, and it's making some commentary, right? It's basically a look to camera like, hey, I think we can all agree that Nazis are bad. Let's just be in agreement about that. Right. And so in any event, I thought what was great also about her depiction was that there was a moment where she was sincerely crying and so moved with Homelander and who she felt he was and what he represented. So the sincerity of her beliefs, as rotten as they are, and twisted as they are, she does believe that, really, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's one thing. And the second thing is that it's, again, not subtly, but I think very accurately, demonstrating how things like memes have been weaponized, and how the activity of the internet that was once quite rebellious, actually, and it represented sort of like the people having their say, has now been weaponized, co-opted, and is used as a manipulation tool for whatever point of view. And that point of view is often twisted and hiding all kinds of evil. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you get all that in with her Instagram account, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, you do. And you know, also this show is interesting because there's a case of them sort of having their cake and eating it too that I admire, because the source material of the comic book is written by Garth Ennis. And Garth Ennis, I like a lot of his stuff. I like Preacher, but this guy truly seems to hate superheroes. Like when, you know, he kind of famously wrote The Punisher and had him, like, you know, kick Daredevil's ass and just be like, he really seems to like hate the concept of superheroes to a point where I'm like, hey, I like superheroes. The Boys has a TV show, which is, you know, Eric Kripke's the guiding force behind it. You feel like Kripke likes superheroes, but he still is like, hey, there's plenty to send up here, plenty to also see about the danger if they really existed. It's funny, though, that I think about the finale, and when Maeve shows up, I was like, I was cheering. Like, I was in my living room, like, yes! And so it's funny. So they still get those real moments. Like, they get like a superhero movie moment of her showing up to like join the fight and save the day. But at the same time, I don't think the show's like selling itself out, because it's still kind of presenting it in the bigger picture of how much damage this group can do by their very existence.
I think that's the difference, is that it's showing the cost, right? And so not just the cost in terms of the global cost, but the cost to each individual character. So with Maeve, when Maeve showed up and it was, you know, Maeve and Starlight and Kimiko just beating down Stormfront, which was so satisfying. It's obviously the full arc and the turn on Girls Get It Done, right? So it's like taking this thing that is a commodified idea and then bringing it all the way home so that The Boys has essentially earned that moment. Because I think, and I just want to underscore that I have to imagine that there were people at Marvel cringing in that moment in humiliation, not humiliation, but embarrassed, you know, because they had done that, which just very, very quickly, I won't say who, but I did an interview with a creator. He's a well-known creator, and he didn't understand the reaction to that moment in the Avengers, the girls team up. And I really tried to explain to him off the record, hey, the reason that people had a response to that is because they felt condescended to. And he said, but I don't understand. Why don't you want fan service? I thought fans means we're servicing you. You know? And I said, yes, but in that particular moment, it was sort of claiming victory around a thing that had been unearned. Right? Like they had not yet, Marvel hadn't earned it yet. And so I think what The Boys did was that they earned it by investing in these characters throughout the season, whether it's the villain in Stormfront or whether it's the hero in Starlight or Maeve, you know, and giving them actual depth so that by the time Maeve shows up, we know what it's costing Maeve. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've seen that there's incredible tolls taking on her, and danger continues to. And also, again, that's the thing about, I feel like it's satire and parody, but with affection. I mean, look, that Endgame moment is such an interesting one because every time I saw Endgame, people cheered. Like it worked. I think it works cinematically. It's also incredibly easy to dissect and be like, what? And to say, yeah, guys, you really didn't earn this. It's still a cool moment, but it's kind of hollow when you think about it in the bigger picture. But I can still appreciate both. I can think it's a cool moment, but wouldn't it have been better if the movies had more aimed towards this? So I think The Boys is able to satirize that very directly, obviously, when by the time they're making the movie and they have that scene. But then be like, okay, what if we can really build up to it with these three women who are not on the same page at all, but are going to have all these diverging stories that all sort of do go to the fulcrum and focus on the fact that they all hate Stormfront, and have it so that when they team up, and they're not all best friends now, but that it's like, you know, you can be like, oh, they are united in this moment because they have every reason to be against this woman and what she stands for. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it was very, I mean, again, we've obviously been doing full spoilers and warned as such, but I gotta say it was profoundly, I think what captures the essence of why this show works is two things. One, every character really did get an actual full arc, but one that leaves room for them to grow, including Billy actually making the hugest sacrifice he could make at the very end of the show. But if you think about the Stormfront's ultimate fate, that had been earned. You know, we were sort of building up to that in terms of the training of Homelander's son and his desire for him to access hate. And the way that to that was through his love of his mother. But then it's so heartbreaking, obviously, that the moment he's able to access his power, there's an immediate cost. He's able to access his power and to decimate and basically Vaderize Stormfront, but he loses his mother, the very thing that was motivating him to access his power in the same moment. Like, that's the beauty of this show. It's doing both of those things at once. It's incredibly satisfying for us as an audience to see her taken down, but we have to feel the cost of that at the same time. We don't even get that as a free pass. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it can't be. It would be selling the show would be selling itself out if it were just an easy victory.
Yeah.
There's complications, and that's part of the show innately, and it should be. You know, it's just because it works so well on that level. And yeah, at the end, it's like you can't just like cheer. Yeah, we beat her. Everything's okay, because it's not. I mean, first of all, the show's continuing, but also just even in that moment, it's such a horrible loss that you know, multiple characters, even Homelander to an extent, you know, who is an awful person, but he still is shown to have his own, you know, emotions and caring. So we get to see like the impact that both Stormfront being taken out and Ryan's mom being taken out, like it can happen in one fell swoop.
Yeah, we got to talk about Anthony Starr because he is insane. I got to say, like, Homelander to me, the moments that I love from Homelander the most, I think, are the moments when he's trying to be normal and has no idea how to be normal. So when he's like dealing with his son and he's trying to do a dad pep talk, but he just has no ability to do that because of his own traumatized childhood. And he'll just be like, access to your hate. And then he'll just like wink at Stormfront, like, I got this. I'm a really good dad. Right. And then when she talks about the war and his face to her is like, yeah, that thing, you know, and it's so clear that he's in this inner turmoil of, he doesn't fundamentally have her ideology. Homelander is about Homelander. And I think that's what's interesting also about that as an analogy for some other things that we see in our world. Homelander is about Homelander, but he's an easy thing to map that kind of ideology onto, that Stormfront has. And he doesn't actually care, but she will still use him as a tool, and he will be used because he's getting what he wants, which is adulation and any kind of love, because he was so deprived of love. Let's talk about if Stormfront's still alive. Yeah, right?
I think that there's enough ambiguity there that she could be, right? And it feels like something to have in your back pocket. Cyborg Stormfront seems very possible that she could pop up at some point. I'm guessing it won't be up front in season 3, but I could see it at some point, her coming back. Bionic eye, bionic arms and legs. But yeah, with Homelander, like you said, I think it's a great depiction because when she kind of is spouting off her sort of her white supremacist hate, and he has that look, you know, it's like they could have used that to set up him, like, you know, oh, will this be like, oh, she's too evil for him, and she's not, right? It's not like it's setting up his redemption, but like you said, it's like he's in it for him. So he's not a white supremacist; he's a Homelander supremacist.
Yeah,
you know, everyone, he doesn't care about your race. You just, no matter what you are, you're beneath him. Yeah. And so that's his universal thing. And I believe it's Anthony, like Ant-Man's friend, because he has no H. But Anthony Starr, such a great depiction of this character, because you have to have it evoke that sort of Boy Scout Superman type of thing, but then his real face, but then he's such a mess. And all the grossness with like the mother's milk stuff, not the character, but the actual mother's milk, and all that creepiness, but he plays it so well. He really, it's such a messed up look, because even the idea of like, what if Superman were psycho, we've seen before, but I think this stands on its own, you know, as far as what he's doing.
Totally. And even again, just to pull out a small character detail that I think is really genius, and adds to so much of what the show is mother's milk. Mm-hmm. You know, what could look on paper when you think about vigilantism or, I don't know, you know, like sort of, you unpack the idea of a hero obsessed with making something right, but partially he's just got OCD, you know, and he can't his disease won't let him let it go. I just think that's brilliant. to layer that in there and not overplay it, but it's in there, you know?
Yeah, no, I think they do a really good job with the ensemble, who it's a big ensemble. So as you naturally might feel like some people with, with Billy and Homelander kind of taking the lead, you have these other characters kind of come in and out with, oh, here's a spotlight episode. But when they do take the spotlight, whether it be, Mother's Milk or Frenchie or Kimiko, you really get some interesting stuff with them. I loved with her, by the way, with her brother, who got taken out early, but we really saw their bond. Also, by the way, just on a TV show level, especially in 2020 when people are watching while looking at their phones, I loved that they had a character speaking in Japanese to a character speaking sign language, all of it subtitled for long scenes. So it's like, put down your phone, you're going to pay attention to what's happening with these two characters, and it's going to be really interesting and emotional.
Yeah, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. We haven't even had the chance to get into the Lamplighter backstory, which again, they continue to even have that. He's such a total villain, but he was also in his own right a little bit heartbreaking because he had meant to do a murder, but he hadn't meant to do the murder that he did.
Right.
And we haven't even talked about kind of like the Scientology storyline with the Deep and Adrian.
The Deep is great part of this show because that character is amazingly nuanced, right? Yeah. I don't think you can easily say like, oh, he is a bad guy on this show. He's a mess. And his trying to find himself, but he's and the thing when he was on drugs and Patton Oswalt was the voice of the Gills.
Yeah.
It was amazing. That's a really cool part of the show. And I feel like it's a part of the show that could have in lesser hands felt like, why are we even still following him or what's going on here? But I think that between the way they write him and the performance, it maintains itself as he's trying so hard to be something that's not a natural fit for him. And by the end of the season, I think we have, yes, we have like Maeve. Maeve is much more sort of now with Starlight as far as like firmly anti-Homelander and these kind of people within the Seven that are probably working to destroy it from within. But the Deep remains this kind of wild card of just because he wants to be part of the Seven so bad. I sort of love, and even A-Train, who began the series with a murder and is sort of so narcissistic. I think that they do some cool things with him and sort of the layers of him and him so desperately wanting to be seen as like number one and the best and where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think with the Deep, I'm an animal lover, right? And so it's really interesting for me to watch because they've layered in his character flaw. That's putting it mildly. It's so bad, right? Like it's unforgivable.
Yeah.
And yet then when I see him love these animals and be heartbroken over the loss of the whale, which frankly I was as well, it does evoke some level of empathy for him. You realize there's a human being inside there as well. So yeah, I do think that the show does an excellent job of layering these characters. Want to talk really quickly heading into season 3. We have some open threads in terms of Huey joining not only obviously the twist at the end of not only has he joined what he thought was, and I think this is another great layer. He thought he was fighting the good fight, but on the legal front now, right? But actually she's a part of it. There's just, I think it's a little bit like deep statey, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it still makes for interesting television.
Yeah, I agree. It was interesting at the end of the season. There were a couple things that were like, because we had like the reveal with Newman.
Yes.
And then we had Starlight. Because I did wonder, like, I was kind of surprised that she's like back with the Seven at the end of the season. I thought, they might just clean split her off. She was already working with the boys more and more. But I think it's early enough in the show you can still keep it convoluted, right? And the fact that she and Maeve are, if not on the exact same page, they've now have this united thing with them. And then with the deep state thing, there's a lot of levels to the show with, what's going on with the politics thing, which again, I don't think it's the strongest part of the show yet, but I'm curious to see where it's going to go. And also, what do you think of Stan Edgar, Giancarlo Esposito, who I don't know, I feel like he has a clone because he's in so many things.
It's insane.
Great by his very presence. I do think that character I'm sorry, he hasn't had like a big moment yet. Like, of course he's got some like cool Giancarlo Esposito moments, but I do want him to do a little more to justify it being Giancarlo Esposito.
Me too.
And I'm hoping maybe he'll have him and Newman next season. Maybe we're going to get more, because who knows? Are they secretly working together? Or are they arch enemies? They could go a lot of different ways.
Well, and that was kind of my question too, and I hope they are seeding that, because I think rather than the character earning Giancarlo Esposito, they're relying on him to make the character interesting, just the himness of him, which I think is a little unfair.
Yeah.
Him as an actor, like, he's just so inherently interesting and talented.
Right.
And we already kind of have, he has an imprint on us. Mm-hmm. And so his presence tells us something emotionally, like, this is a man of character, but he's also very dangerous.
Yeah, he's important, He's
very important, and you immediately sort of get that, but they haven't really earned that on the page for him.
Right.
I hope that and especially since they've earned it on the page for pretty much every other character,
mm-hmm.
but I hope that they do. With Newman, my nit to pick with that, and then we'll have to wrap it up pretty quickly here. My nit to pick with that is they had her eyes cloud over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why in that entire room with cameras everywhere and all of those people having their heads exploding, did we never see that? And no one caught it.
Special contacts to disguise it so people wouldn't see what really is happening to her eyes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it works as a reveal in and of itself, but we don't know her enough yet to be like, oh my God. It's just like, oh, that works. But now it'll be interesting to see where she is next season. And I do hope, and I'm pretty optimistic given what the show did in season 2, that they'll really bring her up in a big way. And also that maybe it can help with Stan Edgar get something sort of juicier to do in season 2. I almost feel like you're right. Like, they cast him and then they had so much going on that they're like, we'll leave that for later because Giancarlo can kind of carry the weight of bringing something deeper, no pun intended, to that character for now while we're working on everyone else. And hopefully
which is fine. And I just hope they do, because my presumption at the end of the show was that Newman had been working for Roth all along, and she was basically like they had planted different people in the government, and they realized that they were going to need that if they didn't create an oppositional force to something as powerful as Roth, that it would be born of its own, right? Yeah. So they created it so that they could control it, which again is very cynical, but it makes for interesting it's a little conspiracy theory-ish, but it makes for interesting television. And we'll see what that means for Huey. Poor Huey, my God.
He's gone through a lot.
I love him.
Yes, me too.
All right, so we've pretty much covered it, but we want to hear what you guys have to say as well. What did we miss? What were some of your favorite moments of the season? Your favorite violent moments or your favorite sweet moments? And sometimes they happen in the same moment. Yes. And tell us what you think about Homelander jizzing all over the United States.
That's a metaphor.
It's not that. Right. All right, Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us today. Leave us your comments below, and we will see you Monday for more shenanigans.